Somewhere in the black pressure-heavy silence of the deep ocean, where sunlight is not just absent but forgotten, a creature is moving as if time itself made a mistake, as if extinction was only a rumor humans told each other to feel safe, because what was once declared gone for 66 million years is now swimming just beyond the reach of human certainty. And this is the story of the coelacanth, a fish so strange, so ancient, that its existence forces science to question whether extinct is a permanent condition or just a word we use when we stop looking. Because in 1938 off the coast of South Africa, something unimaginable happened when a museum curator named Marjorie Courtney Latimer looked into a trawler's catch and saw a fish that should not exist in any modern sea. A bulky, armored, alien thing with lobed fins that moved not like a fish but like the beginning of limbs. And in that moment biology cracked open. Because this was not just another species, this was a ghost from the Devonian world, a survivor from a timeline we believed had been erased when the dinosaurs were still young, and yet here it was, cold and wet on a dock, proving that deep in the ocean there are places where evolution slows, hides, and preserves life like a sealed message from Earth's distant past. And as scientists rushed to examine it, they realized this creature belonged to the lineage of lobe-finned fishes, closer to the ancestors of land animals than to most modern fish, meaning that in its anatomy we could see echoes of the moment vertebrate life first considered stepping onto land, and suddenly the coelacanth was not just a curiosity, it was a living fossil, a phrase that sounds poetic but carries the weight of scientific shock, because fossils are supposed to be dead impressions in stone, not living, breathing bodies moving through the ocean in the present tense. And yet this animal defied that boundary so completely that even today its discovery feels like a breach in reality. As if Earth briefly forgot to finish its story, and for decades after that first encounter, scientists believed the coelacanth must be a rare survivor, maybe a single lineage clinging to survival in deep underwater caves off the coast of Africa, living at depths where light fades into perpetual twilight, where pressure crushes most forms of life, where the world becomes slow and silent. And in that silence the coelacanth became a symbol of hidden continuity, a reminder that extinction is often just ignorance wearing certainty as disguise, because what we cannot see we assume is gone. But the ocean has never agreed to human assumptions, and it was not until 1997 that another shock arrived when a second species was found in Indonesian waters, proving the coelacanth was not a single relic but part of a wider, deeply hidden lineage still surviving across the Indo-Pacific darkness. And this changed everything again, because it meant these fish were not accidental survivors but adapted specialists of a world we barely understand, living in volcanic caves and underwater slopes where currents carry nutrients like invisible rivers through stone, and their bodies are not designed for speed or aggression but for suspension in time, with slow metabolism, electrosensitive rostral organs that detect faint electrical fields from prey, and fins that rotate with a limb-like motion that looks almost intentional, almost like a rehearsal for walking that never completed its transition. And the more scientists studied them, the more unsettling they became, because every detail in their anatomy felt like a memory preserved rather than an innovation achieved, as if evolution itself had paused here and decided not to erase the draft. And so the coelacanth became a biological paradox, a creature that should not have survived mass extinction events, asteroid impacts, climate upheavals, and the relentless rewriting of marine ecosystems. And yet it persists, not in abundance, not in spectacle, but in secrecy, and perhaps that is the most important part of its existence, because it forces us to confront how little we truly know about the largest habitat on Earth, the deep ocean, a place that covers most of the planet but remains more unexplored than the surface of the moon. And in that unknown space, the coelacanth drifts like a living contradiction, heavy-bodied and ancient, carrying within its DNA a record of life before forests, before reptiles, before mammals, a genetic archive older than most continents. And as researchers began to sequence its genome, they discovered something even more fascinating, that while it is ancient in appearance, it is not frozen in time, it has continued evolving at a slower rate, adapting in subtle ways to deep-sea life, proving that living fossil does not mean unchanged, but rather selectively preserved under extreme ecological stability. And this distinction matters because it dismantles the myth that evolution always moves fast or visibly, instead revealing that sometimes the most profound evolutionary strategy is patience, invisibility, and depth. And so as we descend further into the story of the coelacanth, we are not just following a fish, but entering a different philosophy of survival, one written not in speed or dominance, but in endurance across unimaginable spans of time, and in the dark waters where it lives, there is no urgency, no surface world pressure, only the slow pulse of an animal that remembers. An Earth we can only reconstruct from fossils and imagination, and yet here it is, still alive, still moving, still defying the finality of extinction. And that is where our investigation begins, not with certainty, but with a question that science thought it had already answered, until the ocean quietly proved otherwise. Because once we stop treating the coelacanth as a museum artifact and start treating it as a functioning predator, the entire illusion of it being frozen in time begins to collapse. And what emerges instead is something far more unsettling and far more scientifically important, a living organism that has simply chosen a strategy of extreme patience in an environment that punishes speed. So when researchers finally managed to observe Latimeria chalani and its Indonesian relative Latimeria menadoensis in their natural habitat, what they found was not a sluggish mistake of evolution but a highly specialized deep reef hunter moving through underwater volcanic slopes at depths between 150 and 700 meters, where daylight is reduced to a cold blue memory and every movement carries energy costs that must be carefully justified. And in that world the coelacanth behaves like a drifting presence rather than an active swimmer, hovering in caves formed by lava flows, often suspended upside down beneath rocky overhangs during the day, conserving energy with a metabolic rate so low it borders on biological minimalism, and then at night it transforms into something more deliberate, using its paired lobed fins not as simple fins but as alternating limb-like structures, moving in a pattern that resembles a slow-motion walk through water. A motion that once inspired early misinterpretations that it might represent a transitional stage between fish and tetrapods, but modern anatomy has corrected that assumption while simultaneously making the animal even more fascinating, because those fins are not half-legs but fully evolved structures adapted for precise maneuvering over rugged terrain where hovering is more efficient than swimming, and as it glides through darkness, it relies heavily on a specialized sensory system known as the rostral organ, a gel-filled electroreceptive network embedded in its snout that can detect minute electrical signals emitted by other organisms. Meaning the coelacanth does not hunt by sight in the conventional sense but by reading the electrical language of muscle contractions, heartbeats, and fin movements, turning the ocean floor into a field of invisible signals that it can interpret with eerie precision, and when prey is detected, usually small fish or cephalopods drifting too close to the caves it inhabits, the coelacanth executes a slow but efficient suction feeding strike, opening its jaws in a rapid expansion that pulls water and prey inward, a mechanism shared with many modern fish but refined here into a near-silent ambush system suited for an environment where energy conservation is survival itself. And yet what makes this animal scientifically disruptive is not just its hunting strategy but its internal architecture, because unlike most modern bony fish, the coelacanth possesses a primitive but functional intracranial joint that allows the front of its skull to lift slightly when feeding, increasing gape. Efficiency, a trait once thought to be a stepping stone in vertebrate evolution but now understood as one of many specialized adaptations that simply survived in this lineage, and beneath all of this is a skeleton that tells a deeper story, with a notochord filled with oil rather than a true vertebral column in the conventional sense, and a reduced, fat-filled swim bladder that is not used for buoyancy control in the typical fish manner but instead likely plays a role in maintaining neutral buoyancy at extreme depths, effectively turning the animal into a weightless drifter in a high-pressure environment where floating without effort is the difference between life and exhaustion, and this entire physiology is wrapped in thick, heavy scales covered with a unique pattern of cosmod-like structure, giving it an armored appearance that once contributed to its early classification confusion, because when scientists first encountered it, it looked less like a modern fish and more like something excavated from stone, and that impression was not entirely wrong, because genetically it carries ancient regulatory pathways that date back hundreds of millions of years, yet those genes are not static relics but active participants in a living organism that continues to interact with its environment in real time, and when scientists sequenced its genome, they expected to find extreme stasis, a near-identical match to fossil ancestors, but instead discovered a more complex reality, a slow-evolving lineage with surprisingly modern genetic regulation in immune function and sensory development. suggesting that while its external morphology appears conservative, its internal biology has been continuously shaped by deep-sea pressures. And perhaps the most emotionally disorienting discovery came when researchers observed its reproductive strategy, because unlike most fish that release eggs or spawn externally, coelacanths are ovoviviparous, meaning embryos develop inside the mother's body, nourished by yolk sacs, sometimes for over a year, resulting in relatively large, fully formed juveniles being born in the deep ocean darkness, a strategy that prioritizes survival over quantity. And in a habitat where encounters are rare and mortality is high, this method ensures that each offspring enters the world already equipped for the demanding environment it will inhabit. And all of this raises a deeper question that science is still struggling to fully answer. Why did this lineage survive when so many others vanished, especially during the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous that erased the dinosaurs and reshaped life on Earth? And the leading hypothesis is not luck alone but ecological isolation, because the coelacanth lineage appears to have retreated into deep marine refuges where environmental change is buffered, where temperature fluctuations are minimal, where predators are scarce, and where evolutionary pressure operates in slow motion rather than explosive bursts, effectively turning the deep sea into a long-term stability zone where ancient forms can persist without being forced into rapid adaptation. And yet even that explanation feels incomplete, because it assumes we fully understand the deep ocean's complexity, when in reality we have explored only a fraction of it, and every new discovery suggests that the abyss is not empty but densely layered with life forms that challenge our assumptions about extinction and survival. And so as the coelacanth continues its silent existence in underwater caves, drifting through volcanic landscapes shaped millions of years after its ancestors first appeared, it becomes more than just a biological curiosity. It becomes a reminder that Earth's history is not a straight line of replacement but a branching, overlapping system of survivals and disappearances, and in that system, the coelacanth is not an exception but a signal that our understanding of life's timeline is still incomplete, still vulnerable to revision, still waiting for the next impossible discovery to appear in the net of human observation. And if Part 2 revealed the coelacanth as a living machine of deep-sea adaptation rather than a passive relic, then the final layer of this story forces us to confront something even more uncomfortable, that extinction is not always an ending, but sometimes just a gap in observation large enough to fool an entire species into believing it has understood its own planet. Because after 66 million years of assumed absence, the coelacanth's reappearance in 1938 did not just rewrite textbooks, it exposed a blind spot in human certainty, a reminder that science is always working with incomplete darkness rather than full illumination, and in that darkness the coelacanth becomes more than biology, it becomes a philosophical interruption, a living contradiction to the idea that Earth's history is already fully mapped. Because every time we label a species as gone, we are really saying we have not seen it, it no longer exists, and that distinction matters more in the deep ocean than anywhere else on Earth, where vast regions remain uncharted, and where ecosystems can persist in volcanic trenches, oxygen minimum zones, and underwater cave systems that behave like isolated worlds, and the coelacanth survives precisely because it belongs to that hidden architecture of Earth, not the surface narrative of change we are familiar with, but the slow subterranean continuity that runs beneath it. And when we zoom out from its anatomy and behavior, what emerges is not just a fish but a time capsule of evolutionary experimentation, a lineage that split from the path leading to modern ray-finned fish and terrestrial vertebrates hundreds of millions of years ago, yet did not disappear, instead finding refuge in ecological niches where competition is low and environmental change is buffered by depth. And this is why its existence feels almost supernatural to human perception. Because we are evolutionarily biased toward visible change, toward extinction events that leave obvious gaps, toward fossil records that end in clean lines. But the coelacanth refuses that simplicity by existing as continuity rather than conclusion. And even its name carries this tension, because living fossil suggests stasis, yet its biology reveals persistence through slow transformation, with subtle genetic drift and deep-sea specialization accumulating over time without altering its recognizable body plan. And when we examine its place in the tree of life, it sits within the lobe-finned fishes, a group that once diversified widely in ancient oceans, most of which did transition toward land-dwelling vertebrates, but one branch chose a different path, retreating into deep marine environments rather than expanding into terrestrial ecosystems, and that decision, if it can be called that, shaped a lineage that would later be mistaken for extinct, not because it failed, but because it became invisible, and invisibility in nature is often indistinguishable from absence. Especially when human exploration is limited to surface waters and coastal zones, leaving the majority of the deep ocean functionally unknown until very recently. And even now, with modern submersibles and remote sensing technologies, each descent into coelacanth habitat feels like entering a different temporal regime, where biological rhythms are slower, metabolic rates are reduced, and ecological interactions occur on scales that defy human intuition. And in this environment, survival is not about dominance but about endurance, about maintaining function with minimal energy loss, about existing in a state of perpetual low activity that stretches lifespan and reduces risk. And this is where the coelacanth challenges one of our most basic assumptions about evolution, that progress must be visible, fast, and directional. Because here evolution behaves like geological pressure, slow, cumulative, and often invisible until examined over immense timescales. And when we reflect on the fact that coelacanths are still alive today in Indonesian waters and the Western Indian Ocean, often found near steep underwater cliffs and lava-formed caves, we begin to realize that the ocean is not just a habitat but a parallel archive of Earth's biological history, preserving lineages that surface ecosystems have long erased. And perhaps most strikingly, these animals are not relics waiting to be replaced. They are active participants in modern ecosystems, feeding, reproducing, interacting with their environment in ways that are fully current, not historical, which means the word ancient becomes misleading, because it implies irrelevance, when in reality the coelacanth is simply operating on a different evolutionary timescale, one that does not align with human expectations of novelty. And this mismatch is what created the shock of its discovery, because science had already placed it in the category of finality, and nature responded by proving that category incomplete. And so the coelacanth stands today as a biological correction to human certainty, a reminder that extinction is often a hypothesis waiting for deeper data. And as exploration technologies continue to improve, the question is not whether more surprises exist, but how many entire lineages are still hidden in the planet's least accessible environments, continuing their existence beyond our awareness. And in that sense, the coelacanth is not the last of a dying world, but a signal from a living one we have only partially learned to see. And its survival reframes our understanding of time itself, because it shows that deep time is not only something preserved in rock and fossil, but something still breathing in the ocean, still moving through dark volcanic corridors, still carrying forward a genetic memory that predates most familiar life on land. And when we finally accept that reality, the story of the coelacanth stops being about a rediscovered fish and becomes something larger, a lesson in humility written in flesh and fin, reminding us that Earth is not finished revealing itself, and that what we call disappearance may simply be existence, happening in places we have not yet learned to look.